And I mean, being a Gary Vee fan, I'm sure you've heard the fact of like he says how many famous artists quit one day too early, and they'll what if tomorrow was the day you would release that?
Wait,
Yeah.
yes. Okay, wait, we got to talk about this. Okay, maybe you've even seen this person. Have you were on TikTok? You watch
Uh huh.
TikTok? Have you seen Vault Boy music?
Maybe.
There's a
I
song out there
follow a
right
lot
now
of
called.
musicians on TikTok, so okay, continue with that though.
He's got this song right now, and it's like it goes, "Everything sucks." Not real. It's everywhere on
Okay.
TikTok right
Yeah.
now. And I look back, I look at him, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh!" Because years ago, 2014, I went to a house show for an artist, Jeremiah Daly, playing his guitar, and I have been a fan of this kid forever. I love him. Like I just love his music. I just have always been a fan of him. But I was like, what's going on? Like why is he not famous right now? Like he's got so much talent, and like all of a sudden I stumble across a video on TikTok and it's him, and I'm like, holy goodness, like he's blowing up all over the place. But like it wasn't an overnight thing for him. It was house shows where there wasn't a lot of people. It was playing at barns in the middle of nowhere, Georgia. And like I've seen his journey, and I know that there's probably so much more to the journey that I haven't
Mm.
even seen. But I think like, yes, like you continue to show up.
I love
And
that story.
I know
That's
I
amazing.
yeah, it's
That
just
is so encouraging.
yeah. But I
Yeah.
think too, like one of the things that like I do that like I think probably is a lot of times like inspired by Gary Vee is that like I am very much of like, okay, like if I'm gonna try this, what can I learn in the process? If I'm gonna
Hmm.
do this, what can I learn in the process? And then it's like that will eventually at some point become content that you can use,
Hmm.
But like if you just show up to like learn as much as you can and like document your process, not even like for other people, but like for yourself, that you can look back over the last 7 years or 10 years to be like, whoa, like this was happening or
Yeah.
that was happening or this is how I grew there. It's like, yeah, like I don't know. I think that what makes me like what grieves me is that like we do want to live so much of our lives for other people, but like are we missing the life that is right here?
Yeah.
Like is life really just the behind the scenes stuff? Because I remember when I had like 5 readers, and you could not take from me the magic that I felt every night sitting down to like write my blog post. Like that magic is still with me and I will never be able to duplicate it. Like same thing with starting more love letters.
Yeah.
Those 2 a.m. hours that like it was just me up with the world, like I think back and I think like that's the good stuff. Like be there, be in that process, because you're gonna look back one day and it's gonna be gone.
It is so true. I couldn't agree more with that. Enjoying the process because so it's funny. So we're talking about documenting the process. We're talking about
Yeah.
enjoying the process. And back when I dropped out of college, so I'm terrible with math. So I realize I'm coming up in my seventh year, not in my eighth year.
Okay.
I want to clarify that. So July 3rd, 2014.
Okay.
I dropped out of college May or
Seven
whatever.
years.
Yeah, well, so yeah, college was like probably May it ended, right? Or
Yeah.
whenever college ends. But July 3rd, 2014, so 7 years ago and 3 days or whatever that is, I started journaling my process. Every single night I have what I did that day and how I'm doing.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so I'm coming up on 7 years of every single day. And it's the point of that is I haven't shared it with anybody yet. Like my goal, the
I was gonna
goal.
say, where's the video on that? I want to watch it. Like,
It's a legit journal. I actually debated. It's a lot of it's pretty personal too, so I have to figure out how I'd want to do it. But it's straight up every single day. My goal, so I'll explain why I did it, and then I'll explain the point about why I'm meant bringing this up. Is
yeah.
when I started, I have some high goals for myself, where I want to go, career wise, and I'm like, I have no idea how to get there. And if only there was some sort of roadmap. I'm like, well, there isn't. So I believe I'm going to get there one day, and I'm going to create the roadmap. And my journey is not going to be your journey. It's not going to be Joe's journey and Sally's journey. But you know what? If they read my journey, they can cherry pick. Oh, that's such a good idea. Maybe I could try that. Maybe it'll spark something in them to try something,
Yep.
right? So
Yep.
like that was the goal with it, and I want to share the journey. I also want to share like, hey, It wasn't an overnight success. I played a show and there was 3 people there and 2 people were making out in the corner. So there's one person, you know what I said?
In there.
My favorite story, tangent, is when I played a gig, one of my first gigs, and there was nobody there, that the bartender went in the back. So I was playing to an empty room.
My heart.
But that's the story, and I document that, and I tell that story, and that's whenever that was, you know, sometime in 2015 that happened, you know. It's like, the point being that, like, looking now, when you said documenting the journey for other people, but also for yourself, and the truth in that statement is, now I look back on some of those things and be like, oh my gosh, remember when I was so excited when I first overnight, like, I got 3,000 views in a day, and I was like, that blew my mind, you know what I mean? And it's like looking back on those moments to help you. I think they keep you humble and grateful, you know, because at least for myself, I've found so often the continual chase for growth that I forget that I was one day hoping for 1,000 views a day. Now I'm hoping for, you know, or like, you know, or I see the channel go from, you know, say 3 million views a month to 1.4. And I'm like, oh man, that's like, you know, it dropped half in views for whatever reason, you know, maybe I'm not posting, whatever the case is. But I'm like, but if I look back in my journal or the vlog or whatever, you know, whatever I'm doing, it's like, I remember when I first had 100,000 views for the month, you know what I mean? And I was so excited about that. It's like, okay, that was 4 months ago. Like, keep perspective, Jake. You know what I mean? Like, it's so important, documenting for other people, but documenting for yourself to keep the perspective.
I could not agree with you more. Like, I do it in my work. I do it in my personal life. And like, I was literally just like thinking about this today, was just about how, like, when I went through that, like, depression in New York City, like, I carried a notebook around with me, like, everywhere, but I didn't really like document things. I kind of just, like, at that point in my life, I really like lived in my own head. Like, I was like writing stories all the time. So I look back on those journals and it was very much like not a lot of what was going on, and way more like very like, you know, stories and then like prayers and like, God, where are you? And it's kind of depressing. But what was so hard was when I went to write my first book, I didn't really have much to go off of because my journals were not full of like my firsthand experience. You know, I look back and I'm like, I wish I had documented that better. It'd be a lot easier to write out of like what, like, our memories are faulty to begin with, you know? And so what happened was, like, when I went through that life-threatening depression, I had a Word document that I had open on my computer at all times. And every single day I made myself sit down and document the day of what had happened and what I had walked through, because I knew at some point I'm going to come out of this and I'm going to write a book one day about this, about coming out of these woods. And I want to be able to look back on the process of like what was really going on in the moment, you know? And so it's like, you don't ever know, like, so much of this that you have been documenting, like, that's not one video, like, that's so many videos and so much content that is going to encourage other people. And like, the beautiful thing is that you've like written it over time and you've stockpiled it, because I caution people that are like, their lives are the content. Our lives are not meant to be content. Our lives are not meant to be consumed in that way. That's a really dangerous way to live, I think. Is like, if I'm content for you, or if my marriage is content for you, or if my baby is content for you. I just don't think it's healthy, but I see a lot of people doing it, you know? And I think that like there should be distance between the things that we're creating and then like our actual real everyday lives, you know? But what's beautiful about what you've done is like you've stockpiled it over 7 years. That like when you go to talk about something that was like 5 years ago, like you're not in that space anymore. You're not in that. It's not going to take from you to share that wisdom with somebody else. And I think, you know, so often we get into this space of like, my life needs to be interesting because my life is the content. And I would do anything to save somebody from that space, because it's an empty space. Yeah.
Always looking for the next thing. Absolutely. But like you say, it's looking back on it now, like it's such a good remembrance of like, oh my gosh, remember when, or talking, you mentioned depression, how you used to have that Word document open, like, you know, struggling with anxiety. Like, I remember, like, it's so easy to get caught up in like, oh my gosh, I'm still struggling with this. But then I look back and I'm like, oh my gosh, if I was struggling this much, yeah, I'm still struggling, but now it's this much. Remember when it was
Yep.
we get so caught up in our head in these timelines and feelings, but when we actually look back and be like, oh, it was nowhere near where I am
Yeah,
today. You know what I mean?
totally.
It's such good perspective things, but